What's up? My name is Konstantin Baum. I'm a master of wine, a retailer and a consultant, and this is my channel where we are thirsty for knowledge and wine. So this is Wine in 10, where I tell you everything you need to know about a region or a grape variety in less than 10 minutes. Today I'm going to talk about a region that is way too complex to cover it all in one video, so I'm going to split the region in different parts and then do different videos on those different parts. In this video, I'm going to talk about the most important part of this iconic region. It is the region where most wine nerds end their wine tasting career because it takes some time to understand this part of the wine world. So drum roll, I'm going to talk about Burgundy's Côte, which you actually already knew because it's in the title. So let's start off with a little history lesson. Winemaking in Burgundy really started when the Romans conquered Burgundy in 51 BC. It is pretty likely that the Celts already made wine in the region before the Romans arrived, but the Romans really brought a lot of know-how and understanding of growing vines when they came into the region. In order to understand winemaking in Burgundy, you really have to understand the influence of the monks in the region. They really changed the dynamics of winemaking in Burgundy and exported their business model all around the world. Monasteries received vineyards from the royals and wealthy donors who wanted God to be on their side. Monks, on the other hand, needed wine for mass and for their own entertainment. Monks could really focus on improving quality because they had time, they had cellars, they were able to keep records, and they were pretty well educated for those times. The first important monastery in Burgundy were the Benedictines of Cluny, who received, for example, the vineyard that is today known as Romanée-Conti in 1232. The other really important monastery were the Cistercians, who were founded a bit later than the Benedictines, near Nuits Saint-Georges, and were the first ones to make Chablis, and the first owners of the vineyard known as Clos de Vougeot. The monks were real wine nerds, and they are the reason why Burgundy today is so well understood. But nerds also make things more complicated than they should be, and this is the reason why the vineyards of Burgundy are today so difficult to understand, as they have been broken up into smaller and smaller parcels in order to isolate different characteristics and different quality levels. Another really important character in the history of Burgundy was the Duke of Burgundy, Philip the Bold, who wanted to decrease yields and increase quality in the region. He ordered vintners to rip out Gamay vines and plant Pinot Noir instead in 1395. He actually said that Gamay is harmful to human beings, which is a bit rough, but without him, Burgundy might not have been recognized as one of the greatest wine growing regions in the world. Burgundy as a whole includes 30,000 hectares of vineyards, and the Côte d'Or is right in the middle of the region, and it is known for producing really high quality wines. The Côte d'Or is only roughly 50 kilometers long, and it sits between Dijon and Santenay. The name Côte d'Or either means golden slope or it means Côte d'Orient, as the exposition of the slopes is towards the east, the Orient. Côte d'Or is also the name of the département, the administrative district. The Côte d'Or sits right on the fault line between the Morvan Hills and the Saône Plain. This part of France was underwater during the Jurassic period, and when the water receded, crustaceans and shells died, fell to the ground, and limestone formed from their remains over time. This is why most parts of Burgundy contain high levels of limestones, and most vineyards are made up of clay and limestone. This little stone is actually a piece of limestone from a vineyard called Romanée-Conti. Doesn't taste of much though. In general, the best quality grapes come from the middle part of the slope. The bottom part of the slope is most of the times too fertile for high quality wine production, and the top part of the slope is oftentimes too sparse, so that wines tend to be more light and not as profound and concentrated. In this middle section of the vineyard, which tends to be at an elevation of 250 to 300 meters above sea level, you can find most of the Premier Cru and Grand Cru sites. At the top of the slopes you can find mostly village level wines, and at the bottom of the slopes you also find village level wines or regional wines. But I'm going to talk about the quality levels in a minute. The Côte d'Or is split up into two parts. You have the Côte Nuits in the north, which is known for amazing red wines, and you have the Côte Beaune in the south, which is known for great red wines and great white wines. In the Côte you find those famous villages called Gevrey-Chambertin, Mory-Saint-Denis and Beaune, for example. It produces some of the greatest red wines in the world, but it only represents less than 2,000 hectares of vineyards and 5% of the total production in Burgundy. In the Côte de Beaune, some of the greatest white wines in the world are made around the hill of Montrachet and in Cote-en-Charlemagne. Villages like Chassagne, Puigny and Meursault are known around the world. The only Grand Cru site for red wine in the Côte de Beaune is Cote, but there are some amazing wines being produced in Beaune, Volnay and Pommard, for example. As a whole, the Côte de Beaune only represents 11% of the total production in Burgundy, and there are less than 4,000 hectares planted to vineyards in that part of the Côte d'Or. I want to dig in a little bit more into the quality classification in Burgundy, as this confuses lots of people. In this classification, vineyards are classified, not producers like it is the case in Bordeaux, and not individual wines as it is the case with most wine critics today. So at the bottom you have the regional appellations like Bourgogne Rouge that represents 52% of the region. Above that, you have the village appellations that are named after the village, such as Beaune-Romanée Village. This includes 37% of all wines in Burgundy. Above that, you have the Premier Cru appellations with 640 different sites, like Beaune-Romanée Les Suchots Premier Cru. This makes up only 10% of the total production. And then you have the best of the best. The Grand Crus, like for example Richebourg. There are only 33 Grand Crus in Burgundy and that account for around 1% of the total production. Easy, isn't it? So the climate in Burgundy is continental, with cold winters and relatively warm summers. The region often has problems with spring frost. You might have seen those beautiful pictures of vineyards with lots of different fires burning between the vines. This looks very nice, but spring frost is a real issue and can cost the winemakers a lot of money if it happens. Burgundy also has problems with regular hailstorms or rain falling during spring or during harvest. This is why vintage variation in Burgundy is a real factor when you buy wine. When it comes to grape varieties, there are really two grape varieties that rule Burgundy. One is Pinot Noir as a red grape variety and the other one is Chardonnay as a white grape variety. These two grape varieties are now planted all around the world, but producers still look to Burgundy for inspiration when it comes to making great Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. People often forget that there are also other grape varieties being grown in Burgundy, for example Côte, Gamay and Sauvignon Blanc. In Burgundy itself, grape varieties rarely appear on the label, as vineyards and producer names are normally used in order to distinguish different wines. But now let's talk about viticulture and winemaking in the Côte d'Or. Wineries overall are pretty small in Burgundy. The average domain only has 6.5 hectares of vineyards. The vine density is super high in Burgundy. 10,000 vines per hectare, so one vine per square meter, is pretty normal in the region. This does normally increase quality as the vines have to struggle more in order to get nutrients from the soil, but it also means that most vineyards are not mechanized because you can't really drive a tractor through those very densely planted vineyards. The overall yields in Burgundy are pretty low, less than 60 hectoliters per hectare and even less for Premier Cru and Grand Cru sites. Winemaking in the Côte d'Or varies from producer to producer, but pretty much all of the great producers use barriques, small wooden barrels, for their red wines and their white wines. But there are differences when it comes to destemming, maceration time, use of cultured yeast and filtration, for example. Especially the topic of destemming grapes was hotly debated in the region. On one hand you had Henri Jaillet, who destemmed all of his grapes. On the other hand, you had Aubert de Villaine from the Domaine de la Romanie Conti, who was using very little destemmed berries. In my opinion, if done right, wines made from whole bunch, not destemmed grapes can have the more complex aroma and a more appealing, more age-worthy structure. So in conclusion, even though I travel through Burgundy 3 to 5 times per year, it is still a region for me that is very complex, and I probably will never really understand Burgundy in its entirety. There's also no other region in the world where it's so difficult to find really great, affordable wine. There are so many different factors at play, so it's sometimes really difficult to know what you're getting until you're tasting the wine. But if you are like me and you really want to continue learning about wine for the rest of your life, Burgundy is a great place to be. I hope you enjoyed my introduction into Burgundy's Côte d'Or. If you liked the video, then please like it down here, subscribe to my channel, and make sure that you're not missing a video. I'll see you guys again soon. Until then, stay thirsty.